Welcome to Saint John, Nothing Happened Here, with your host Mark Allen Green, a show all about a little city on the east coast of Canada where nothing ever happened. Except for this.
We're back in our search for nothing. This time, let's go to before Saint John was Saint John, August 27th, 1775. We find ourselves in a small settlement at the inner harbor close to the mouth of the Saint John River. To call it a village would be generous, but there are men, women, and even children who have made this place home. There are 2 or 3 well-appointed homes, a dozen stores and warehouses, and everyone is busily working away this hot summer day. And across the harbor, we see a sizable but aged British fort and a flash of a redcoat on the top of the ramparts. That confirms the fort is manned with British soldiers. However, how many is unclear. We are in the community of Portland Point, which supports the business ventures of a small group of Massachusetts entrepreneurs. These men received land grants here in 1762, and since that time have developed a highly lucrative business, taking advantage of the unexploited natural resources that are found here in abundance. We see workers preparing furs, timber, fish, limestone, and a host of other valuable commodities ready to ship out with the hope that they will command top dollar. That used to be a given. But things have changed in recent months. The rumblings in the South have turned into a lot more. War has once again come upon North America. This time the 13 colonies have risen in rebellion against the British, and those colonies were Portland Point's main customer base. Now the only business comes from supplying the British, mainly the troops held up in the besieged city of Boston. But that is only a pittance. Before the war, there would have been multiple ships at any time sitting in the Saint John Harbour. Now we only see one, the Loyal Briton, loaded with foodstuff destined for Boston. But at least things are peaceful here. To the people around us, the war seems a world away. But isn't that always the case? Until it's not. Something catches our eyes in the outer harbor. A ship has just rounded the corner coming in from the west. Maybe it will be one of those rare 2-ship days, but no one here seems to be prepared for its arrival, nor welcoming it. The ship comes closer and closer. We squint our eyes trying to make out its flag. We can't see what it is, but we can see what it isn't. It is not the Union Jack. Also, the deck is full of people. There must be 20, maybe 30, or even 40 men. This is no cargo ship. There is only one reason to have a crew that large. The ship is now close enough to fully see. The vessel is armed with 4 cannons, and the men are carrying muskets. And more importantly, they're heading straight for us. Perhaps it's time we should go. But at the last moment, the ominous vessel veers to the west and slips out of sight behind a Loyal Briton. We now hear shouting from the fort across the harbor, angry voices followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Everyone around us stops what they're doing and looks out at the water in disbelief. It appears the American Revolution has arrived. Saint John Harbour is under attack. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. My name is Mark, and over there is the one, the only Peter Gillies, who is the guest host for this episode, which means it's Saint John. Nothing happened here, with the exception of the raid of 1775. So we're at the 250th anniversary of this raid that most people probably haven't heard of.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't even heard of Saint John, never mind.
Well, that's true. Okay, good point there. Good point there. So a lot of people do not know that Saint John was attacked not just once, but a few times by the Americans during the American Revolution.
Yeah. The rebel Americans, as opposed to the loyal Americans.
Two different kinds of but everyone's American at the time, right? So Good point to be making. I always find this interesting, Peter, about history is there were a bunch of monumental events that led to this raid of 1775 on Saint John Harbour. And then a lot of monumental events came from this and helped shape what happened in the future for the American Revolution. And so very interesting, and we're going to get right into it. But this is where I think we need to start, Peter, is we have to start explaining.
I'm shaking my head in the affirmative.
Which is not coming out on audio.
No, I guess nobody's watching, eh?
No one's watching you, Peter. I am. But so what we have to do is we have to explain what started the American Revolution. And here on St. John, Nothing Happened Here, we're getting pretty good at explaining very complicated, detailed points in history in about 3 minutes. So let's see if we can do that. See if we can explain the entire beginning.
You do it in 3 minutes. I'll see if I could do it in less than 3 hours.
Okay.
You go.
3 days?
3 days
it's a big issue.
Accurate, yeah.
Okay, are you ready, Peter?
I'm as ready as I can get.
Okay, I'm going to take you back mid-1700s. So after centuries of colonization, Britain and France controlled most of North America with a little bit of Spain mixed in. But no one was happy in staying within their own borders. So the French began building forts in the Ohio River Valley, which was uncomfortably close to the 13 colonies that would become part of the United States. So the British sent a young upstart by the name of George Washington.
That's guy.
George Washington to confront the French. That did not go well. And that started something called the French-Indian War, which led to or was part of a bigger global conflict called the 7 Years' War, except the French-Indian War was 9 years long. The British ended up coming on top of that war, took over all of French North America and a little bit of what Spain controlled, the Floridas, and went broke in the process. So the British go to the 13 colonies and they go, hey, dudes, come on. We protected you against the French. We spent a lot of money. You owe us. And the 13 colonies go, no, you listen here, dudes. You were protecting your own interests. We're not paying a cent. And then the British go, well, we own you. So if you don't pay voluntarily, we're going to tax you. And that's what they did. The colonies hated that because they didn't have any representation in the British Parliament, who were the ones deciding what taxes to levy. So then the taxes began, Peter. So we had the sugar tax. That didn't go over well. There was a boycott. British were forced to repeal it. Then we had the stamp tax. Again, boycott. British forced to repeal it. And then the British didn't just double down. They tripled down on this. So they go, we're going to pass the everything tax, which was boycotted, had to repeal with the exception of the tea tax. Now, by this time, the British were fed up with the colonists, the rebellious colonists, and they decided to send troops to Boston. Now, Peter, Boston didn't like that. And they started to protest the British troops. Some of the British soldiers ended up getting a little bit trigger happy, fired into the crowd, killed 5 people, and that became known as the Boston Massacre. So support for Britain started to wane after that. And the colonists decided, okay, we're going to go after the last remaining tax, and that's that tea tax. They came up with a pretty brilliant way to go after that tax. They decided to sneak on a British vessel sitting in the Boston Harbor loaded with tea. And then they took and dumped that tea, 10,000 pounds to be precise, into the Boston Harbor, which became known as the Boston Tea Party. Britain really loves its tea, so they were quite offended by this. So they go, okay, we're going to send more troops to Boston, and we're going to revoke the charter for Massachusetts, the colony of Massachusetts. That made the other 12 colonies really nervous, because they go, well, if they do that in Massachusetts, they'll do it to us. So they decide to get a meeting together, which was known as the First Continental Congress, 12 of the colonies showed up. One didn't. I think it was Georgia. For whatever reason, they didn't show up. And they go, okay, what do we do about this? And someone came up with the idea, why don't we just ask Britain to stop it? And they go, okay, let's give it a try. And they go, Britain, will you stop it? They said, no, we won't stop it. They go, okay, well, we have no choice. We have to form militia and get ready to enter into a conflict with Britain if push comes to shove. And they set up the Minutemen, who would be ready in a minute to fight the British if necessary. So Britain gets wind of this. They go, okay, we're going to go out and confront those militiamen. And they go to Lexington. And they go out with overwhelming force, Peter. Like, this is the largest military in the world going out against poorly trained, poorly armed militiamen. Go to Lexington. It gets really tense. Shots were fired, the first ones in the American Revolution. And the British push the militiamen out of Lexington and make them have to back away to Concord. Now, Britain's going, okay, we got them. We're going to go in, finish them off. And then more militiamen ended up joining in Concord. Now the British are outnumbered. They have to pull back. They pull back to Boston while they're being molested the entire time by the militiamen, including George Washington, who surround Boston, and that gives us the siege of Boston, and that takes us to where we need to be. Did I do it in 3 minutes?
Yeah, sort of.
I hear you.
I'm going to give you a passing mark.
Okay. Give me a B.
And actually, on a scale of what you know and what most people know, I'm going to give you about an 85%. Maybe.
Oh, hey, that's
90.
pretty good.
But then again, a lot of people don't know much about it at all. I always counted the beginning of the American Revolution as being 1763, which was the signing of the peace treaty at the end of the 7 Years' War, and the American War of Independence. I've always considered to be about early 1776. To 1783.
From a legal perspective, it makes a lot of difference when it started, because when did it go from insurrection, treason, to a war that was recognized as war with the articles of war and the rules of war? So that's very interesting. But now we got to see, how did all of this end up on the doorstep of St. John's, before it was St. John, of course, in the Saint John Harbour. And I'll have to say, Battle of Machias. Peter, can you take us through the beginning of the Battle of Machias, one of the first naval battles, if you want to call it a naval battle, of the American Revolution?
And it's usually considered the first naval battle of the American Revolution, or the war, which becomes the War of Independence.
Machias, Maine.
And Machias, Maine, which was actually Machias, Massachusetts.
It was.
Maine was actually kind of like a department of the colony of Massachusetts Bay. Which
I'm sure they loved that, being called that.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Your department.
Well, actually, I don't know that they minded, really, to be honest with you. It was just the reality of life. Maine doesn't become an independent state after a couple of attempts until 1820. But in terms of the Battle of Machias, Machias is a seaport. The Battle of Machias, as I said, is usually considered the first naval battle of the American Revolution, certainly by the United States Navy. There was no United States Navy at the time, of course.
There was nothing. I'm glad you said that. Like, this is overwhelming odds. You're going up, as we just talked about, the largest military on the planet Earth at the time, and they didn't even have a navy. They had nothing.
If not the largest, they were certainly the most professional. The Navy was probably unequaled, although the French attempted a number of times to be their equal, and maybe they did actually, but at a couple of times, of course, by the Napoleonic Wars, nobody can beat the Royal Navy, and the Army is probably the most professional army in the entire world. It's a small army, but it is easily the most professional army in the world. And,
so the Americans are going to get it handed to them, or
really,
so everyone would think at the time.
Yeah. It's also important to remember that when they started out doing this, they weren't really talking about independence.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about getting concessions from Britain, all that stuff about, no taxation without representation. That was true, although each colony had probably more representation than even Britain did. Manchester, England, had no representative in the British Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And stamp tax, everybody in Britain paid a stamp tax. They've been paying stamp taxes for years. And so it wasn't anything new. It was just new in the colonies. And the colonials were just upset by it. And it's also important to realize, I think, that not only were the people that we come to call the rebel Americans, or eventually the patriots, if you like, the Tories, what were called the Tories, or eventually became the Loyal Americans or the Loyalists, were pretty much in those days. They were just as everybody was upset with things like the sugar tax and the stamp tax and all the other tax and the Townshend Acts and the Intolerable Acts and all of the things that were coming over from Britain. They were just as angry as everybody else.
Peter, are you saying that no one really liked taxation without representation?
Nobody liked taxes.
Oh, you see, that's odd, isn't it? That people are upset about taxes.
Yeah. Personally, I don't think, is there anybody around these days that have a problem with taxes?
Oh my God, I love paying them. Give me GST on top of GST, and I'm a happy. Yeah. No, so no one liked taxation. Like, no one was happy with this. The colonists had been left alone for centuries. And then suddenly Britain's starting to exercise control. Maybe it's the same amount of control that they put over their people in Britain, but it's the change that gets you. And maybe, as you're saying, they didn't want independence. Maybe give us a couple of seats in Parliament. We'll be happy.
Yes.
But Britain wasn't going to do that. There were plenty of ways out for Britain.
Many.
But the hubris got them going, we're British. You're colonist. Remember your place. If I could do a British accent, I would have done that.
Yes. And it's important to remember the colonies were actually, and not just by Britain, by other imperial places, colonies were basically to make money for the home country.
Now, Peter, I'll have to ask you, can you do a British accent?
Not very well.
Okay, I won't put you on the spot, because what I was going to ask you is if you could pretend I'm a colonist and put me down in the most polite way, but really put me down in that polite British way.
But that would be against my nature.
Oh, there we go. Okay, you tell it as it is, right?
Yeah, and especially I'm certainly not going to put a friend down.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Well, thank you. I think. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to the Battle of Machias. Let's go to June the 11th, 1775. What's happening in Machias, Massachusetts? I think the siege of Boston now plays back into this, because the British soldiers, they were all trapped in Boston. They had to be supplied by ship.
Yes, the British have retreated to Boston. Thousands of British troops have been put in Boston, and they've been doing it since 1768. There were rumblings in Boston from the get-go. And so even, after the Townshend Acts of 1767 and all that kind of stuff, Boston got riled easily.
It doesn't now.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so the British felt they needed to control Boston more and better. So they don't have a lot of military troops. Got lots of Navy, but they don't have much in the way of military troops. They start stripping places of troops and stuff like that. They're pulling troops out of different forts all over North America, and that includes all the British colonies in North America. There's, counting the islands of the Caribbean and territories, there's something like 23 British colonies, not 13. There's 23 of them.
23, and they're sticking a lot of those soldiers in Boston, and they are cut off, and they have to be supplied. You got to feed the troops, Peter. You got to feed the troops.
Yep.
So they went to the bastions where they could go to say, okay, we need to get supplies. We need food. And they went to Machias. And they had a guy. I love this guy's name. His name was Ichabod Jones. Ichabod.
Yes.
Who was the last Ichabod you ran across, Peter?
Crane?
Have you ever? Yeah, Ichabod Crane.
Not personally, no.
What a great name! If any of our listeners have the first name Ichabod, please contact us.
Please write.
I would love to talk to Ichabod.
Is it a family tradition? Where did it come from?
Where did it come from? How did you become an Ichabod? So you had a loyalist merchant, and he was supplying the British. Now, the townspeople of Machias, they really, really hated that and go, no, what are you doing, Ichabod? Whose side are you on? So we had a supply vessel coming into Machias. There were two transport vessels and a British Navy ship. And that was the HMS Margaretta. And they were coming in to grab some supplies from Machias from Ichabod Jones. And the townspeople go, no, you're not Ichabod. Nope. We're going to arrest you. And as soon as the captain of the Margaretta came on shore, they tried to arrest him. What was his name again?
O'Brien.
That was the guy that went against him. Moore.
No. That's it was Moore.
James Moore. So James Moore, he bailed. He ran down the streets of Machias and he got in his boat and he ran and he got away. But then they go, we're not going to let you get away, Moore. That's not going to happen. We're going to go out. So they steal one of Jones's ships. And then they're met with another. It sounded like nothing more than a fishing boat. And they go out to the HMS Margaretta, Royal Navy, and ambush it. What happens, Peter? What happens? This is getting exciting.
Yeah, they capture the ship and the crew.
No bloody way. They capture a Royal Navy ship.
Yeah.
And I think 2 people were killed in that, and James Moore was mortally wounded. And now they have in their possession, the townspeople of Machias, a Royal Navy vessel. And then you go, we're on a roll. You brought up the O'Brien brothers. So that was...
Jeremiah and John.
O'Brien. So they go, okay, we're going to do it again. So you kind of had this, can we call it piracy? Of like we're in an insurrection, so this is not legal.
You're the lawyer. You tell me. I think that's piracy. It's certainly insurrection, and that's maybe even treasonous.
So Machias is now the scourge of the Atlantic seaboard.
It's a Royal Navy ship.
So they're picking off, they're grabbing Royal Navy ships.
Yeah, they did. They do it a month later. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is all coming up, and this is in the summer of 1775. And then we have the Machias Safety Committee.
Committee of Public Safety.
We'll stop there right now. I want to take us to Saint John to see what is in the Saint John Harbour at the time. And if you don't mind, Peter, we're going to step into our time machine. We're already back in time, but we're going to go even further back in time to 1764. And we should actually say, in the Saint John Harbour, what had happened, it was under French control for centuries, and it got overthrown by the British in 1755. So they controlled it, and all the blood that was shed for the Saint John Harbour over all the years, and they just kind of left it. The British just left it. There was nothing there. Until 1764, when a couple of Massachusetts entrepreneurs go, I want to get in on this. We got some good resources. So tell us about the guys coming in from Massachusetts.
Governor Lawrence of Nova Scotia. Remember, Nova Scotia at the time was current Nova Scotia plus New Brunswick. New Brunswick was Sunbury County in Nova Scotia. In 1764, word is put out by Governor Lawrence that he is offering land and the opportunity for people to settle in what is now New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, come up and get some land and settle and start doing some business and make some money, get land. It's important to remember that the huge number of people that were comparatively living in what we would think of as New England, those folks are second, third, fourth, maybe fifth generation British Americans. And if their families had land, it's been divided and subdivided again. And, some folks just don't have any land. And here's an opportunity.
So Massachusetts, some guys down there, they answered the call
yes.
of money. And it was our guys, James Simons, William Hazen, and James White, and two other guys, Blodgett and Peasley, which seem to have just disappeared from the historic record.
There was another Simons as well.
There were two Simons?
Yes, Richard. They formed their company in 1764, basically their partnership, and they divided into 4 equal parts. James Simons got 1 part, William Hazen got 1 part, James White got 1 part, and then 3 junior partners split the 4th part.
Okay. So we're getting into let's make some money. So what we have now in Saint John Harbour, we have really nothing except that old Fort Frederick on the west side. So just for the people who don't know Saint John, the important thing for us right now is we have the Central Peninsula. That's to the east of the Saint John Harbour. And then we have that middle part, which is going to be, it was called Portland Point at the time. That's going to be really important to this.
Yes, that's the north end of the harbor.
North end of the harbor. Now, and at the west is the high point. That's the highest point around that harbor. That is what we call, or what has been called Carlton. And it had a different name, but let's kind of set this up. So we have the Simons brothers coming in, right?
Yes.
And we have White and we have Hazen, and they're going to set up shop. And what they get into the business, Peter, fur trade. No brainer there.
Simons gets into the hay business first.
He gets in the hay business?
Yeah.
What the hay?
He because it's a commodity. It can be sold.
Okay, so Simons is going, I want some hay.
Yes.
And then the other guys go, oh, Simons, that's great. But we got more than hay. And he goes, no, I think hay is where we should put everything. Well, how about Simons? How about the fur trade? Can we get in on that? Fisheries, lumber. And then you got to burn lime. Burn lime. And do you know why you burn lime?
Go ahead.
Why do you?
I know.
Okay, because I didn't know when I read the burning of lime, the bustling industry of burning of lime. I go, why would they burn lime?
Yeah.
Tell us, Peter.
Oh, it's used for a whole lot of things, actually. Partly fertilizer, and also for when you're building houses in the walls,
mortar,
stuff,
plaster.
All that kind of stuff. That's made of lime.
Yep, and purifying water, which was really important in the 18th century. So that was the bustling thing, and it blew up. So they were making some good money doing this. And then where their operations were, you had that Fort Frederick, and that's on that west side of the harbor. But in that north end, that central part is Portland Point, and that's where they're having their operation. And they had a community, a very small community. Okay, so let's build that up. 1763, when the Simons brothers, Hazen and White, ended up coming to town. They had that Portland Point in the middle, and they go, this is where we're going to set up because it's good anchorage, all that kind of stuff. We can ship out of that. And then they set up a town. So they had some wharfs, some warehouses, the partners, the four partners had their own homes, which were kind of nice. Then you had a limestone, a salt store, a log store, the new store. They stayed up all night, Peter, trying to think of the names for these stores. You had a blacksmith shop, and then we even had something up at Lily Lake, didn't we?
Yeah. They had a grist mill up there. They had a sawmill. They had a Cooper's. There was so much barrel making. You needed it for the
ship things.
You needed it for the salted fish.
Oh, salted fish. You're making me hungry. Nothing like a good salted fish. So things are going well. Then you have, over on the west side, there's a community starting there. So we have Portland Point, which we just talked about. Then we have, what was the name of the township on the west side? No one knows this. I would like to do a survey of people in Saint John going, do you know what this place was called in 1775?
You know, I did a presentation quite a number of years ago, and I said, "Has anybody ever heard of the township of the town of Conway, or an area known as the township of Conway, or anything?" And one guy put up his hand and he said, "Wasn't that Digby, Nova Scotia?" And I said, "I that was the last response I expected." I mean, it is true. Nobody knows that the town of Conway existed.
So there's the fun fact of the podcast, I think.
Kind of disappears by the time the Loyal Americans arrive, the refugees. In the process, unbeknownst to the people that went to what is now the Annapolis Valley and specifically to the Digby area, they didn't even know township of Conway existed. And they named their town Conway.
How dare they? We were the first Conway.
They eventually renamed it Digby.
As they should. I have some population figures. Our audience will want to know, how many people were there? You're saying that this is kind of a bustling metropolis starting. I wouldn't call it a metropolis, but I do have the population figures for 1775. Do you want to hear them?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, Portland Point. So that is that main place of operation for Hazen, White, and Simons.
Yeah, that's right.
70 people. 70.
Yes.
38 children, 12 women, 20 men. Now let's go to the bustling metropolis of Conway.
Oh, it's bigger.
It's bigger, Peter. 72 people, 38 children, 13 women, 21 men.
Conway is spread out more, though, than Portland Point. So Portland Point is, it's crowded. Conway is a much larger territory, and it has more people, but the density is considerably less.
So you're saying they had urban sprawl in Conway?
Yeah, they had urban sprawl. In
Everyone
Conway.
wanted to have some elbow room. So the fort is right at that base of the West Saint John, where it hits the Saint John Harbour, where the river opens up. So it's right across the harbor, but the river from Portland Point. So it's not very accessible. It's not accessible at all. It's only accessible by boat.
Well, pretty much. Yeah, because there's a lot of marsh over there.
There's a lot of everything over there, especially in 1775. So that's going to be important, that separation, that physical separation by water between Fort Frederick and Portland Point when we get into the story. But so we're Simon's brothers, Peter, Simon's brothers, Hazen, White, they're making money hand over fist. We go, good times. We really made a good choice in 1763. Right. And then the American Revolution starts and go, this is going to put a damper on business.
Oh, it did.
It did put a damper on business.
Because why? Why?
Because the Americans are no longer buying from British-controlled areas.
Right.
And so they lost their customer base.
All the business that the guys in Portland Point were doing was all stuff going basically to Massachusetts.
There we go. So you lost a major market.
And they lost a couple of their partners.
Oh, yeah, because they weren't in on the deal on staying with the British. So that's where we started getting the divide. But we had Simon's brothers, Hazen and White. They were loyalists, right, Peter? They were loyal to the crown.
Well, they were loyal. I don't know if they come under the term loyalist.
Loyal as far as a paycheck goes.
Well, they were loyal. Yeah, they were loyal. That's a toughie because I think probably they, more than any of the other people had come up from the New England colonies. These guys that had the business in Portland Point probably had a better handle on how important it was to have a relationship with the British.
But it wasn't that kind of altruistic loyalty. This was because they were Americans. They were Americans, and they were from Massachusetts, and they had a lot of friends from Massachusetts.
And for those listening, we're talking about Americans being British Americans.
So there were still a lot of ties between Massachusetts. So I don't think they were totally on board with what the British were doing, but they were making a lot of money because of it. And they had some plum appointments in the British government.
Yeah.
So they had every interest, personal interest.
Yes, they did have some appointments.
They did have some Nova Scotia appointments. So they were like, okay. So I think, this is my opinion. Tell me what you think, Peter. I think if the Simons brothers, Hazen and White, had their way, they would have stayed neutral. But wars don't allow, like especially this war didn't allow neutrality, did it? You couldn't stay on the fence.
No, you couldn't. Absolutely. You had to be one or the other.
So now we've set up Saint John. Now we got to go back to Machias. Okay, let's go back to Machias and the Machias Committee of Safety. The Committee of Safety.
I think I called it the Committee of Public Safety before, but that wasn't right. It was Committee of Safety.
Committee of Safety. Okay, it has a good ring to it. What would that be? The MCS. Do you think they went by the MCS?
Yeah, maybe.
They had T-shirts.
Yeah.
Proud member of the MCS.
Yeah.
Serve and protect MCS.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what we had was the head of the MCS got word that there was a vessel in Saint John Harbour that was about to be filled with supplies to go to the besieged soldiers of Boston.
They knew it was coming up from Boston to go to the mouth of the Saint John.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't Saint John. We need to be clear that this was not called Saint John, but it was referred to as the mouth of the Saint John.
So what you're saying, Peter, for this episode, we should be saying mouth of the St. John River. Nothing happened here. Okay. To be correct.
Yes.
Okay. I got you. I got what you're laying down. I like it. I like it. So you have the Machias Safety Committee, and they go, bring me the O'Brien brothers. Bring me the O'Brien brothers, because we're going to go get that vessel in St. John Harbour.
And Jeremiah is probably the most successful sea captain, and just like, he's the go-to guy. Unfortunately, he's gone.
Yes, he's busy. His calendar, his dance sheet was completely taken. So they go, okay, well, who else do we have? Well, we have this Captain Stephen Smith. I guess we could send him. Go, come on. Can't we get there must be more O'Briens out there. Okay, fine. We'll go with Captain Stephen Smith. So they bring Stephen. They go, okay, this is what we need you to do. We need you to go up there. The vessel is called the Loyal Briton. It couldn't be more antagonizing, right? Like it's just going, the Loyal Briton at the beginning of the American Revolution. You go get that, you seize it, you bring it back to us. So Captain Smith goes, okay, I'm going to go on my vessel. We don't know the name of the vessel, do we?
No, we don't. And I have never been able to find out, and I have heard of other people trying to find out, and they can't find out either. So
go figure. A mystery.
Yeah, it's kind of odd.
Go figure.
We know the name of the ship they took, but because that ends up being in court records.
No, exactly. So Captain Smith gets 40 men together and starts sailing towards St. John, New Brunswick. The mouth of the St. John River, with the population unaware, seemingly, that this is going to happen. Okay. So we got to get into this, Peter, and I want us to play act a bit, if you don't mind. So do you want to be Simons or do you want to be White?
I'm going to be, do I want to be Simons or White? Well,
James Simons lived till he was 95, if that sways you.
I'm not know that I'm ready for that either. But anyway, okay, I'll be James Simons, and I have experience in wartime and for 7 years war, and a young soldier and doing business.
James, you're bragging. I have that too. I was in the 7 years war too.
Really?
But we're sitting at Portland Point. We're sitting there. We're having some drinks. and going, hey, you know what? Business will turn around. This American Revolution will be over by Christmas.
Well, they weren't even calling it that, were they?
Whatever this is, this will be over by Christmas. The Troubles.
Yeah, the Troubles will be over by Christmas. Yeah.
So we're sitting there, and I go, hey, James, what's that ship coming in? We weren't expecting any ship, were we, James?
I don't know who that is.
I don't know who it is, but wait a minute. Let's look closer.
Look at the flag.
Look at what's the flag, James?
To be honest with you, between you and me, Mark, I don't think we know what the flag was. There was no such thing as the U.S. flag. Pretty much everybody else would have flown the Union flag, or a variation of it, like the Red Ensign.
Okay, James, I'm getting really nervous here because all I can say is that ain't a British flag. And, look closer. There's 40 men on board. You would not normally see 40 men manning a transport ship. No. There's no way you would see 40 men. Okay, so what would the Simons boys, the Hayes and White, if they were there at the time, which we don't know, do we? I think White was there. I think the record does have White being there, and I think Simons was there.
Simons was probably there too.
If we're at Portland Point, are we running for the hills right now?
I'm getting behind a big wooden wall there. There. That's where I'm going.
You're nervous.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, You're nervous. This is happening before our eyes, and they go right. Yeah. They don't go for us like we're going. Are they going to be coming to us? Are they? Oh, they seem to be veering toward Fort Frederick, which has the Loyal Briton anchored in front of it.
Well,
seemingly,
my take is that the Loyal Briton was actually anchored in the river somewhere in between the two communities.
So the Loyal Briton, it's a 120-ton brig, which is an okay size for the time. And it's loaded with oxen, sheep, swine, smoked salmon, and butter. Again, I'm feeling hungry right now. It's lunchtime where I am. And
lots of stuff.
It's loaded. It's fully loaded. So Smith went straight to Fort Frederick, which makes sense because that's the military installation. Now, there, as you said, Fort Frederick is fully manned, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's not at the time. It's been left with a skeleton crew.
It's fully manned for a fort in Nova Scotia at the time of 1775.
And how many would that be, Peter?
They've got a corporal and 2 soldiers.
Wow, formidable.
Hey, that's up. When Campbell, who had been the governor of Nova Scotia, went to visit in 1771, complained that there was nobody there.
So we can safely say between 3 and 6 soldiers. So Smith is coming in hot, right? Like he must be really worried about attacking Fort Frederick with his 40 men. No, he just went in, and I think it was just a surrender.
My take is that the first thing they did was they took the ship.
I thought they took the fort first, because that would seem natural, because they wouldn't have known exactly the resistance that they might get from the fort.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we know that they went into the fort. It was a 2-day raid. Technically, they were in the harbor for 2 days. So sometime in day number 1, they did go into Fort Frederick. They took prisoners. So let's go with the prisoner list. They took that corporal you were talking about. They took him prisoner. They took the captain of the Loyal Briton prisoner at some time.
Sterling.
And maybe he ran when he saw the ship. He goes, I'm going to Fort Frederick. So maybe everyone was there at the time. But Captain Frederick Sterling, Loyal Briton, 2 privates, and they grabbed their wives and 5 children.
Yes.
Which seems like an odd choice, unless Captain Smith was going, I want to keep families together. I don't want to take away the dad. But it seemed like a very odd choice.
Yes, that might be the reason they took the women and children. But then again, that would be more people to trade.
Okay, so they might be hostages, essentially, to trade for other prisoners?
The only reason you would take people like that is so that you could trade for them later.
Prisoner
military
exchange?
Exchanges was a normal part of warfare in the 18th century. You know, I have 2 colonels for your general.
Three colonels, and you got a deal.
Yeah, I'll give you 5 lieutenants and 1 captain for Colonel Smith. You know, that kind of stuff, right? And I've got 2 privates, their wives, and their 5 children. That must be worth at least 3 American soldiers.
Why did you grab the wife and the wives and the children? But yeah, so you had that, and then you had 1 passenger who was, I guess, going for Boston, maybe a vacation. I don't know. But they were going to Boston. John Anderson.
What was his name? Anderson or whatever
his name was. John Anderson. He picked the wrong ship to go to Boston on because he was taking.
Well, I think he was just on the run because he'd never been up there.
Well, maybe.
Right? It's like you get on a cruise ship now in New York or Boston, and you sail up to Saint John and Halifax, and then you go home again. People do that every year.
So he was sightseeing?
Yeah.
Okay,
people are just
like
literally on a cruise.
Yeah, he's on a cruise.
Yeah, people traveled.
An 18th century cruise.
Sure, yes.
On a transport ship.
Well, yeah. The best.
Love it.
Hey, listen, I had a friend that went to Europe, worked her way back and forth 2 or 3 times to Europe by working on cargo ships.
Okay, well, you know, it's a good theory.
New.
I like it. That's what we do on this. We speculate, right? Maybe that John Anderson was on a cruise.
You know, you're gonna see harbor seals,
renowned for salmon and butter. Pick up a souvenir, go back to Boston. So yeah, that's John Anderson. And then we had 2 people who actually escaped, John Semple and David Ross. They were the owners of the vessel, right?
Yes.
So they escaped.
We had a couple of guys who were on the crew of the Loyal Briton who joined the rebels.
Yeah.
They signed up. Take me, I'm yours.
Yeah.
I like this.
We're not resisting, we're joining.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. And again, the Machias pirates, right? The scourge of the Atlantic seaboard. Yeah. I'm joining in on this action. So they were taken prisoner. And then what happened was they go, okay, we got a nice, juicy Fort Frederick with some barracks. It's got to be something left behind. And they pillaged it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they grabbed anything of value in there. So they spent the night. It sounded like they had a party the first night in Fort Frederick.
Yeah, they could have.
I think they had a party. And then, like any party, it ends with burning the thing down. So they burned down the fort and the barracks.
And actually, there were some barrack buildings, I believe, outside the fort, and they may have burned those too.
Oh, they burned it.
There wasn't anybody in there.
Well, no, because they were all prisoner. They got all 3 of them. Or 3 of the 6, sorry, 3 of the 6. They took everything they could and they burned the thing down. Now, remember Portland Point. So you're James Simons, I'm William Hazen, and we're seeing a fort being burned down. We must be getting nervous by now that they're going to be coming over the river and coming to get us next, but they don't.
Yeah, they don't.
They don't. They obviously are into pillaging, but they decide to leave Portland Point and the rest of Conway unmolested.
Yeah, and there could be a whole lot of reasons for that. I mean, you can speculate.
Name 2.
But, I mean, you know, Captain Stephen Smith is in charge. He's the guy that the Committee of Safety chose to do this job. And he may be just kind of sticking to his orders.
Maybe.
You know, in that nothing is said about attacking Portland Point. Basically, you're after the ship because we know the ship is being loaded with cattle and sheep and pigs and smoked salmon and butter and vegetables and who knows what else.
Fort Frederick might have been a necessity going, well, it's a British fort. If we're going to grab this ship, then we're going to have to secure the fort. So then everything's going according to plan. We're nervous over Portland Point at this time, but then they grab the Loyal Briton and they sail away on day 2. They sail away back to Machias with their prize going, hey, look at us. I am Captain Stephen Smith. I'm as good as any O'Brien. That's what he said. I'm as good as Eddie O'Brien as he went into Machias Harbor. And they go, yes. No, you're not, Smith. No, you're not. You'll never be an O'Brien. But they came back. And then what happens to the prisoners?
Well, we don't actually know what happens to the corporal or the captain.
Well, supposedly they were sent to court. We know that they were sent to court. We do know
they went to court, but they may have gone to court. And I mean, somebody somewhere also just said the 2 privates, the wives, and the children are to be returned.
Here's my theory about this, Peter, is that the Smith came back and go, look at me, I'm better than any O'Brien. Go, well, you know what an O'Brien wouldn't have done? Wouldn't have captured 2 wives and their children. Send them back. And that's what they did. So right away, it was no prisoner exchange. They sent the 2 privates, the 2 women, and the 5 children right back to Saint John. So I think that was like, what the heck were you thinking? But then we have John Anderson. He was released, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, so John Anderson was released. So the only ones that were kept was the captain and corporal. Now, you can't just take that. You can't just take the Americans coming up and burning a British fort down to the ground and have no reprisal for that. The British have to do something. What they do is they send 2 warships to protect the Annapolis Royal, which they said, okay, that's a town worth protecting. Mouth of the St. John River, maybe not, but let's protect them. 2 warships start patrolling the Bay of Fundy. 1 warship goes to Halifax to protect them. Militia's called up, but no additional protection of the mouth of the St. John River. So that's what they do. But they go, we have to have a show of strength. And it's not just protective. We have to go on the offensive. That led to one of the monumental events of the American Revolution, I would say, and that's the burning of Falmouth on October 18th, 1775. Can you take us through that very briefly? You got 2 minutes. If I did the start of the American Revolution in 3, you can do this in 2.
I can do the burning of Falmouth in 2 minutes. Well, I'll give it a good shot.
You can.
October the 18th, 1775. It was the British response to the raid on Frederick. The given command of this operation was Captain Henry Mowat. He was a Royal Navy captain, so meant he was an accomplished fellow. And he was given a small British naval squadron, and he was to punish rebellious colonial towns, obviously all on the sea. So he upper anchored, and away he went on October the 6th. He left Boston. He had the HMS Castle. And Mowat, he had other vessels with him. One called the Cat, the Halifax, the Spitfire, the Symmetry, a whole bunch of, several.
Okay, so he's going armed.
Yeah, so he's going armed. Lots of cannons. His orders allowed for a broad discretion in choosing targets. Basically, he could pick whatever he liked that sort of fell into that part of the world. So he thought about a couple of places, but they was dispersed, like too spread out. But then he spotted Falmouth. Falmouth was part of Massachusetts. It is now Portland, Maine. And so he sets his sights on Falmouth. And on October the 16th, he arrives in the harbor. The town is kind of out on a little bit of a peninsula with it's like a hammer, if you kind of imagine. That's kind of what it looks like. And most of the people live on the hammerhead end of it, but there's some people that live along the handle and towards the mainland. So he arrives and he issues an ultimatum. He says, evacuate by 9 in the morning or I'm going to flatten this place. Or words to that effect.
And they said, oh, you're bluffing. You're bluffing, Mowat.
He gives them 2 days, right? He sits outside in the harbor and says, okay, here's what's going to happen after 2 days. I'm going to destroy this place unless you and you have to, by 9 a.m. to actually evacuate the town.
Or swear loyalty to the British crown, right? Like he did give the option.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I thought he goes like swear allegiance to His Majesty.
I think he'd done that already, and they didn't do it. So 9:00 arrives. Town appeared to be deserted. A lot of people did take off. And good thing, on his ship, he hoisted a red flag, which was the signal, and they began the bombardment. And the British fleet, everything they had, all the firepower, cannonballs, carcasses, bombs, live shells, grape shot, even musket balls into Falmouth.
This was overkill.
Yes. And it goes, how many hours?
Wasn't it 9?
9 hours.
9 hours of just leveling a defenseless city that wasn't fighting back. And I like the musket fire. What were they shooting at? Just for fun?
Everything.
Wow. Okay, so this is the amount of firepower that they would be putting behind someone fighting back. No one was fighting back, but they just go on this 9 hour, and then Mowat supposedly goes, I think we left a couple of buildings standing. What do we use? Yes. I'm going to order you, go send a landing party and burn all the rest.
Yeah, go.
Thousands of projectiles, I believe. Like I remember there being a count.
3,000 projectiles
were fired at this.
That's one every 11 seconds.
Can you imagine that? For 9 hours, and no one's fighting back. Like, this is just an insane show of force.
They do have a militia. It's reported later that the militia spent most of its time trying to rescue people.
Well, there we go. Okay, so they leveled the town. That didn't go well for Mowat. That didn't go well for his career, because I think everyone said, Mowat, come on. Like, we did give you a carte blanche, but you took it to a whole new level, dude. So he never really went anywhere with the British military. But what happened from this? This is a turning point, because this was considered so egregious, so over the top on a British response, so cruel to just level a town of defenseless people who were not fighting back at all.
The numbers post the event suggest over 400 buildings were damaged or destroyed or unlivable, and that the raid left more than 1,000 people without a home. And at least 160 families had nowhere to go that winter.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to note. This is October the 18th. This is October, so this is just cruel. And this is what we're seeing with the theme of the American Revolution. If the British had gone a little more soft-handed with it, it might not have happened. They might have been able to negotiate, but they went over the top, and they almost ignited the rebellion by these kind of things. But what we had from the burning of Falmouth, it led to the creation of the Continental Navy. So that's huge. And remember, Falmouth wouldn't have happened but for the raid on Saint John. So we're seeing like how this is all fitting in. Sure. More American privateers. And then this is an important one. This angered the French, which end up getting into the American Revolution toward the end and being the game changer for the Americans. So we have a full war on here. And let's go back to Saint John Harbour. Is it protected? No, it remains unprotected, and the Americans will return. And that is the podcast. And proof, once again, Peter, Saint John, nothing happened here.
Thank you for listening to Saint John, Nothing Happened Here. To learn more, join us at www.nothinghappenedhere.ca or connect with us on Facebook. Other means of communication include, but are not limited to, telegrams, smoke signals, and carrier pigeons. However you want to reach us, we want to hear from you.